Hello to the Harvest family and hello to any others that might be joining us as church borders expand during times of restriction. To my Harvest family, let me first of all say, I miss you. I know that church is not contained inside our four walls, but I really miss what happens inside those four walls. And this definitely feels like option B, as I talk into a phone downstairs in my office while under a 21-day lockdown in Durban in South Africa. Because we are a resilient bunch, we are adjusting to option B, finding ways to make it work, and even adopting the value of that wonderful phrase, never waste a crisis. In the last few weeks, the world has gone into a different type of crisis than we could have ever imagined. I was at the shops the other day, and a youngster walking with his hoodie pulled up to his mouth said, "I feel like I'm in that movie I watched last week. And yet this is our real life, our new normal that we wake up to every morning." In the last few weeks, the world as we have always known it has changed. And I'm aware that not all of that change is bad. You might have seen how the fish have returned to the canals in Venice and how pollution is down due to the factories closing all over the world. There is a strong sense of community spirit and solidarity, and washing our hands is now in fashion. Families are having much needed time together, and people are being forced to rest. And I know that after this, even normal will look a little bit different. And with change comes loss, and how we deal with that loss is paramount to our emotional well-being, to make sure that our grief is an uncomplicated one. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross years ago suggested that we might have different responses to grief. At the beginning of her research, she said that there were 5 stages, but later she explained that they were more like responses or emotions that we might feel. The new research on grief shows that these are not stages that we neatly go through, or even that it's something that all of us experience. Mostly what we know about grief is that we need to give space for grief, we need to give ourselves permission for it, and that everybody grieves differently. I love the verse in Matthew chapter 5, verse 4 that says, "Blessed are those that mourn, for they will be comforted." And sometimes instead of giving ourselves permission to grieve, we often resort to what are called defense mechanisms. Defense mechanisms are coping strategies to reduce uncomfortable emotions. A common defense mechanism is denial, a refusal to accept reality. We can even do this by spiritualizing away the factual reality. Denial can also be compounded by several cognitive distortions that we are likely to adopt into our thinking. A familiar one is black and white thinking. We have a tendency to see things as all good or all bad, as black or white, in terms of extreme, rather than acknowledging that beautiful but tiny word called "and," which brings so much balance to our lives. Applying "and" is helpful, especially in this time. There is good in this time, and this is a sad time. This is a difficult time, and it is a rich time. This is a time of loss and a time of growth. This is a time that we will grieve, and simultaneously, there will be things to celebrate. While researchers have discounted the stage theory, experts agree that anger plays a major role in grief and loss. And sometimes when I work with people who feel a continual or a residual anger, when they get below the surface, they identify some of it as grief. Beneath the iceberg of anger are many other emotions lurking. Anger's tricky. I love what Aristotle said about anger. Anybody can become angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person, and to the right degree, and at the right time, and for the right purpose, and in the right way, that is not within everybody's power. Blame is another defense mechanism that we use, particularly when we think we are under attack. We go to the "whose fault is this?" and try to hook the blame on someone else. It's almost a sense of false power. We've seen this in all parts of society during the rise of the epidemic. Blame might be a natural response, but it is not a helpful one to stay in. And the longer we stay in the blame game, the more we lose out in our relationships. It generally causes shame, it causes division, disconnection, and a lack of solidarity. A third response that Kubler-Ross actually explained is bargaining. Sometimes in the stage we make deals with God. If you do this, I'll do that. And it might be helpful to apply some really good sound theology here. God loves you just as you are, and there's nothing you must do, should do, or ought to do for him to possibly love you anymore. Pray because he instructed us to pray. Pray prayers that make requests. Pray prayers that are relational. Just hang out with God. And pray prayers of relinquishment as Jesus did in the Garden of Gethsemane. Pray because we are instructed to pray and because we are praying to a powerful God, not as a bargaining tool to be used with God. Kubler-Ross and many others since her have explained the value and the power of acceptance. Acceptance is often confused with we are okay with what is happening. Acceptance is actually about accepting the new reality and adjusting, accepting the new roles, reassignments, and the change that has occurred. Acceptance can look like, I prefer things were different, and I can accept the change. Since Kubler-Ross put forward her ideas on grief, there has been much added research to the toolkit. And one of them is the idea of psychological resilience, the ability to emotionally and mentally cope with crisis. And it's important here not to sink into the cognitive distortion of the either or and the black and white thinking. It's not resilience in the place of grief. It's not one or the other. It's both. We are emotional beings, and emotion is embedded into our DNA, and we are resilient beings. We are flexible, adjustable, and while doing that, we still get to feel. I've been very aware in the last few days of an old hymn written in 1873 by a man called Horatio Spafford. After experiencing incredible loss in his life, losing his 4-year-old in the Great Chicago Fire, along with his fortune, and shortly after that, losing his 4 daughters, when the ship they were traveling on collided with another sea vessel. And as he passed the spot where his daughters had drowned while traveling to join his wife in Europe, he was inspired to write these familiar words, indicating the capacity of the soul to grieve and feel great loss, and the resilience of the soul to accept loss and experience wellness. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, he wrote, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to know, it is well with my soul. And in the middle of great loss and overwhelming emotion, while we experience incredible change, it is possible to be well. Over the next few days, I'm going to unpack what a well soul might look like and how we can care for our souls, not just in this time of crisis, but as an everyday practice. Soul care is about caring for our whole being because every part of our life matters. As C.S. Lewis said, we do not have a soul, we are a soul. And soul care is about transformation and about freedom. It is about the integration of all the parts of us as each part impacts the whole. Some of the topics that I'll be addressing are accepting uncertainty and resigning from the role of control, loving others while simultaneously loving ourselves, embracing limits and learning how to stay in our lane, integrating our spiritual life with the rest of our life, feeling our emotions instead of acting them out, which is much easier said than done. We're also going to have a look at facing our past in order to create a different future and creating space for differences and learning to validate those differences. And there might be others that I'll add to the list. But until next time, I'm sending lots of love from my home to yours.